Okay, so welcome back to our channel. Back from summer break. Based on our last video on the ECHR, which has come under a lot of attack in recent times, I did mention that I was going to make more videos on the ECHR just to bring an awareness to the public for people who don't really understand what it is and the importance of the ECHR being the European Convention on Human Rights, the articles of it, and how it protects all of us as individuals against an oppressive state where that may be. And so in the other video, I did mention, obviously, about Kemi Badenoch being the shadow PM, and obviously the likes of Winston Churchill, who was very much involved when Britain became a founding member of the ECHR and had it established in September 1953. But in all that, I mentioned that there was a particular case about a young man who had learning disability, who had been arrested a few times by police on minor charges, really. And I think the one that finally took him into jail, into a UK jail, I'm not going to give any details of what that jail is and the parties that were involved, but to share the story with you, I had an opportunity to sit with the family to speak on their behalf on the inquest. And obviously, the stuff that I discovered, these are some of the issues that really the people of this nation must indeed take the ECHR very seriously, because if the laws of this land and the judiciary system fails you as an individual, and these can be very, very serious, cases like, Stephen Lawrence, his murder in Eltham in 1993, and the likes of Demola Taylor, who also died in Peckham, probably in the late 90s. I don't quite remember the date that was. And tragically, I happened to be in a cemetery somewhere in sort of Plumstead, Welling, that direction. And when I sort of driving past it, I turned and I saw the obviously the grave of Demola Taylor with his image on it. So all these people have suffered a great deal of injustice, their families here in the UK. And for ourselves as a nation, we have also been involved in various atrocities in where millions of people have died in other countries, in other cultures, as a way of building our own empire here in Britain. But in all this, it came to the point, obviously, things like the Holocaust and the Second and First World Wars, for things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to be established in December 1948, 16 December 1948, and subsequently the ECHR being the European Convention on Human Rights in 1953, obviously building on the UDHR to begin to address how rights of people have been abused. And I mean, the funny thing about it is that if it doesn't really directly affect you, you think that, yes, let's get out of it or let's change it. I mean, in recent times, I have read articles. I think that is going to be in the next video, where you see very notable figures in politics saying let's either get out of it completely or let's change it. Let's change things in it to suit us. And obviously, migration has been used as one of these big subject to basically sway the public to follow this, one should say, almost a diabolical idea. We have done that with Brexit and we have seen the consequences. But because people don't really have time to, obviously, based on how busy we are in our daily normal lives, we don't really invest any time to educate ourselves about these things. And so a politician can come up with an idea and, to say, oh, migrants are all criminals, they're rapists, they're this. They only have to say these words. Then the public will jump and follow this idea, which we've done with the Brexit. Now we know the impact of it, how that affects the youth, how, if we didn't come out of it, we can have our young people going into Europe, taking jobs, giving them a much broader space to operate as they obviously come of age. But now all these things are restricted. In recent times, when I traveled to Paris, I saw how just even on the Eurostar, the level of controls, it's probably a two-level control, of people checking your passport and looking at you as if that the passport was not actually you. And this actually happened on both sides of the border. So these things we could avoid. And the fact that we are not even regarded as Europeans when we get into Europe. Many privileges that we used to have in Europe has been taken away because of these crazy and dangerous decisions that we are led to follow. When it comes to migration, probably most of the people that are decision makers in Parliament in Westminster, most of them are from sort of migrant backgrounds. They're rarely local people that can trace their ancestry maybe 1,000 years here in the UK. Everybody came from somewhere to build their lives in this country. Surely, I'm sure there are obviously a whole number of people that probably don't reside in London that may probably be able to trace their ancestry maybe 800 years, 1,000 years, to indeed call themselves to be English people, obviously based on skin color. But majority of British people and the likes of Kemi Badenoch, even I will probably consider myself more British in the sense that she was born here and immediately taken to Nigeria, stayed in Nigeria till she was about 16 to come back, and today has had that privilege. And if it's not because of this sort of human rights laws, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also the ECHR, and probably our local UK human rights laws, one could see that it may not have been possible for Kemi to get to where she is today. Because we know that back in the days in Germany, even if you're born and bred in Germany and you're from sort of maybe you're a person of color, that you will not be given nationality, let alone having that opportunity to push yourself up to this higher levels of politics and decision making. In the UK today, we have somebody like our Deputy Prime Minister. I think I have to try to remember his name again. And David Lammy, of course. In all fairness, I have watched his career. Never did I, or probably never, maybe he never even expected at any time to hold the position of a Deputy Prime Minister in the UK, obviously being of Jamaican origin. But he is. It is because of these laws that this nation needs to protect. But to basically come back on this particular case, I'll just give a little bit of a reference of the ECHR. What it is that it is the articles that protects human rights. That is your rights, my rights, and everyone else's rights as citizens of this country. Now, Article 1 deals with the right to life. So that means that you have a right to be alive. a right that your life is not taken away. In this case, the case that I said I'm going to be mentioning about is a breach of Article 1 of the ECHR, because this person's life was indeed taken away just for the simple fact that the person has learning disability. The person have not done anything to deserve to be killed in a UK prison, and nobody has been held accountable, and lies and cover up has been put in place, and obviously the family are not in a capacity to seek justice for this person, and nobody will ever hear about this case. This case, it should be on national TV, really, for what it really was. But who is going to take up the case? Nobody. And so the person has lost their life. Now, if the person had, or the family had the resources to pursue this case beyond the courts of the UK, because once you get that sort of in the inquest, logbooks that took account of this person's activities, just about 5 days in the prison, all these documents were missing. And yet, the judge was able, and there were other relevant information from expert witness that should have actually come through before a judgment could be given, as in the cause of death. But all these things were ignored. They were not even taken into account. So many failings, and even to the extent that a judge was able to tell the jury, basically the person that was heading the jury, to come up with a verdict, a particular verdict. And indeed, on the next day when the verdict came from the jury, it was that verdict. And I was online, I saw all these things happening. And this is a tragedy. And so we as a nation must be very careful, because when this thing happens to somebody, you think it's somebody distant away, but in reality, these things could happen to you. Even if you're a white English person, these things, and you don't have the right connections, these things can happen to you. And this is why the nation should not be fooled again in this Kemi Badenoch'S idea of fighting to get us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. And obviously we have the likes of my own local MP, Nigel Farage, also pushing for this idea. He was very much instrumental in getting this country to go into Brexit. And yet they continue to spin these ideas to the public, and the public will actually buy these ideas. The next one is the Article 3. So Article 2 is the right to life. So I think I must have mistakenly said Article 1. Article 2 is the right to life. So this is the right that has been taken away from this young man who had learning disability. Article 2 is to do with the prevention of torture. So if any member of your family has been tortured or abused by, let's say, people in authority, then this will mean something to you. Article 3 is to do with your right to liberty and security. That's Article 5, sorry. Article 6 is to do with the right to a fair trial. So this as well, Article 6 is also breached in this particular case, because information was missing. When a person is taken into a prison, the onus of the person's life now lies with the state, because the state is actually taking the liberty of that person, and therefore by law it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that there is adequate, basically the person is safe whilst in custody, that records are kept in the event of death, that records are not missing. And if records are missing, then the state should, or basically the prisons, should be held responsible for the person's life regardless. Because if the information is not there to prove what really happened, and the person's right is actually in the hands of the prisons, then the prisons must take full responsibility when things go wrong. So Article 8, for example, is to do with our right to respect for private and family life. So once again, if your private and family life has been abused, you actually understand this. Then there is the freedom of expression, which is Article 10. Then Article 11 is to do with the freedom of assembly and association. So let's say if the people are not happy with something, for example, yesterday I went to a place, well, not a place, a Tesco, to buy anodine, which I buy pre-COVID. I mean, not even after post-COVID. You buy these things, they're like 16 tablets for probably £2.50. I went into a Tesco, it was £4. I thought I was dreaming, but I checked and it was actually £4. So these are some of the things that if the people want to protest about why prices are just going up and up and up and people's income remains the same, and people want to protest, they have the right to protest so that the government can hear them. And probably if things needs to be regulated, prices needs to be regulated, then the government can make decisions to that effect. So that is also an issue. Article 9 is to do with freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, that you can change your religion, you can decide to teach your religion, to believe in whatever it is that you want to believe in, and still feel that you will not be intimidated or somebody is not going to be trying to kill you because of your religious belief. And obviously Article 9 clause 2 also it's a bit like how should I say it, it's a restriction on Article 9.1, because Article 9.2 talks about, if your religious belief or the way that you conduct it or your activities infringe upon public safety or public order, or obviously adversely affect other people, maybe physically, then therefore that right can be restricted. And so it goes on. It goes on. So there are so many articles in it. But if you have a concern, you can actually go into this ECHR and see the full articles that there are. And this is what really protects you and I. Now, this case that I obviously talked about, a young man, as I said, that just had learning disability. A few times may have been arrested on sort of many sort of petty, maybe shoplifting, or the one that finally took him into prison was indecent exposure. The guy has not really physically done any harm to anybody, but ended up in the prison. Police arrested him and processed him, put him in prison. And the guy was in prison for less than 5 days. And he was found dead in a cell. So there were expert witnesses, because this young man had a doctor that knew his history, and obviously many times that he was in effect a bit disabled, but he's reasonably functional, maybe a little bit of a leg problem, and there was a history of some kind of a fit, which was actually the person was not epileptic, but there's a particular drug that the person was taking for jaundice that sort of triggered some kind of a fit. It was from the drug, it wasn't the person who was epileptic. And so there is a doctor that knew this person that actually, when the person was taken into prison, assessed the person and confirmed that they was in good health. In all fairness, I was surprised about the person's blood pressure, and all the information that they took was extremely good. But within a day or two, suddenly it was recorded that this person became very weak, started feeling very, very weak. When we would be lying down, they didn't want to stand up. Subsequently was put in a cell. But the night before this person died, the person that was obviously the officer that took over the ward, as we know from the documents, that this officer, one officer, had to look after 39 cells, going up and down, recording stuff, just one person. So this in itself is a failing. Are you with me? This in itself is a failing that if that really things like ECHR could be used to query how a place like a prison could just have one person patrolling 39 cells, in which this young man was actually in one of them. So what then happens is that throughout the night, they move this young man into another cell, but that cell was an isolated cell. For whatever the reason, we don't know. And the cell is actually below ground. So you get into a corridor and then you have to go steps down. So in effect, that cell is like a pond, or like a, yeah, if you fill it with water, it becomes a swimming pool, literally. And this person was placed in that cell. And in that cell, they also expose the the hot and cold water pipes under the sink. All that shouldn't be exposed to a prisoner, right? The cell should be such that nothing is exposed. But the problem that we have here is that the evidence, the logbook, at the end when the person was dead, the logbook suddenly was missing. And so even the information that we are given, these are not verifiable information. CCTVs were around. The family requested, if the person was in the cell alone, the family requested for CCTV to be seen for what the prison officer claims that this person had done. And even with that, there is no logbook. This information I'm giving to you is information that was gathered from the ombudsman, or the prison's ombudsman. Yes, their interviewing these officers. So it is what they say, it is their word. There is nothing supporting what they said. But this person claims, this officer who was patrolling, claims that when this young man was put in this pond of a cell, that he pulled the hot and cold water and the cell began to flood. So for 2 hours, the cell was flooded. And before she could get somebody to come, we were talking something like 3 o'clock, thereabout in the morning. And so apparently the person was able to stop just the cold water, and the hot water continued to leak into the cell, and obviously making the cell hotter and hotter and hotter. And so the person was basically suffocating in hot water. I also had the privilege to see the body. I have never seen anything like that. The family could not see it. I was allowed to see it. But the state of the body, the person is a black person. He looked like some shrimp sort of color with lots of black dots in the entire body, as I see the person has been cooked in an acid. But I am just going to read something very short from the documents, from the interview that was carried out, and just to give you an idea of what we are looking at. So then this person's when they were asked a particular question, they answered by, then the work guys came back. He went up to the roof space, was there for a bit, but then he came down and said he did manage to turn it off, this being the hot and cold water. Within that time, I did gone back to the office. My colleague stayed at the door because obviously I had to do paperwork and stuff and write in nomis, which is probably a system. What happened, and whatever happened and still checked on the other prisoners on the wing. So this one person is writing report and still checking on other prisoners. And I came back again. By this time, the cold water tap was off. The hot water tap was still on. So it was getting let me take off my glasses. So it was getting a bit hot in there. So he actually spoke then, not to me, obviously, to my colleague. Get me out. Get me out of the cell. Unfortunately, it was full. I remember it was full, so there was no alternative because usually we did move the prisoner, and I said, look, we can't do it because of XYZ. Then he picked up the TV and he smashed the viewing panel and he laughed. He said, don't. We said, don't. Put the TV down. Whatever. And he just smashed the viewing panel and he stood there and he started to laugh and he put his face to the hatch to get some cool air, I guess. And then eventually, because the water had stopped, everything was fine in the water area. I went back to the office and then my colleague started helping me with the blankets, and Oscar was taken to Mr. X, being obviously this young person. Everybody left. Then it was just me again. So I continued doing my checks. And in fact, I checked on him extra because of the situation. So we see here that this person was left in the, basically the hot tap was still filling up the cell, and this person, it had filled up to the extent that their breathing became difficult. So they used the TV to smash the hatch, according to this lady, so that he could get some cool air. But then she says that the water, everything was okay. Everything was not okay. If the person was, and they couldn't even move the person from that cell, and they left him in there to cook in this boiling hot water. I wouldn't be able to go through the entire file, but the story follows that obviously by the time the person signed off and left, soon, this will be about early in the morning, between 5 and 6 o'clock, when the governor came, this person was dead in the cell. And surely they had cooked in this boiling hot water. And the lady who got signed off in the morning, there about 6-ish, claimed that at 6, when she was signing off, she saw the prisoner, and the prisoner was just standing there and he was okay. But subsequent interviews from other senior figures that were in another wing that obviously had to attend to the emergency when they realized that the person was dead. The other person said that as they were walking in the corridor into the cell, the whole corridor was filled with hot water and steam. So the person's cell was actually below the corridor because you have to get steps down to get in there. Then the lies followed. Apparently, the officer that appeared, who came to see this body basically soaked in this hot water, claimed that when they came, the TV was on and the person was lying on their bed and they were face down and unresponsive. And all this is a lie because this lady also mentioned that the person had used the TV to smash the hatch. So how could you possibly pull a TV off the wall, smash the hatch, and the TV is still intact? And then you go and you hang the TV back and the TV is all nicely working. And so this other person that obviously came, when they came, the paramedics had come. But, well, basically they were trying to resuscitate the body because they moved the body into the hallway because obviously the cell was filled with hot water. So in the hallway, obviously with a bit of room, so the water was not so hot, but the lady claims that the hallway was like a sauna, right? So this explains the state of the body that the family couldn't even look at. The body was passed to the undertaker. The family was not allowed to see the body, right? And this person, when they tried to do a CPR on the body, they came to the conclusion that the body was rigor mortis. Rigor mortis, when I looked it up, it is actually the last stage of death. And this stage, normally, when you see a body and it's in a state of rigor mortis, that means that the person has been dead between I'll say between 2 and 4 hours prior to you seeing the body. And so the reality was that this young man died probably somewhere about 4 o'clock in the morning, when we are told that by 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, the person that signed off said that they saw the body. And so, without going too much into this thing, if this person is your brother or your uncle or your father or your son, how are you going to feel? And so there is no justice for this person. And so they claim that the person died from epileptic seizure. And obviously, all the evidence, as I said, all these things they tell us are just from the interviews. The logbook was missing. CCTV that was requested, they said, oh, we cannot show you CCTV because it may involve other people. And we said, but the person was in a cell by themselves. So they weren't in the cell with somebody. So you should be able to show the CCTV with the person pulling the wire, with the state of how the thing got filled up. Even at the point when obviously these people were called, that were obviously senior in CPR, within the prison, later on ambulance showing up, they could show CCTV, but they said no CCTV, no nothing. So this is the state of events. And so this is where, if the resources was there to pursue this particular case, and even if justice could not be reached domestically, i.e., within this country, because what you see is that once that lies and cover up starts at that lower level, it goes higher, and the same thing is repeated to you. Even if you go to the Supreme Court, they repeat the same thing to you. But if this thing, the evidence, it gets to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and evidence are demanded and evidence are shown, then the prisons would have had to take full responsibility of this particular death of an innocent man, a young man. And the family would have been seriously financially compensated. This person could not even get a decent burial because of lack of financial resources and threats that even when the undertaker had the people that do the post-mortem, they claim they couldn't hold the body anymore. If they hold it, they will start billing the family this and that. There is a whole lot of things going on that, if it's not related to you, you would think that it's for somebody. This is happening to somebody. But I assure you that this, even if you are a white English person in this country, this thing can happen to you if you're not well connected. And this is why this country must continue to remain in the ECHR. They shouldn't change it. They shouldn't amend it to suit immigration issues, because the immigration, when I check the data once again, asylum seekers and this and that is a flat. the line is flat. On the day when the Rishi Sunak wanted to send people to Rwanda, suddenly when he took the thing to the Lord so that he could convert this bill into a law, which they did, and then eventually Keir Starmer had it all reversed when he won the power. So to get all this on the day when it went to, then there was a clashes. They were demonstrating that there were clashes in, I don't know if it's Dover or Folkestone or wherever, that people were coming that. But I checked the data. 2 weeks to the time, there has not been a single crossing from obviously from the channel, from the French side into the UK. So all these and the press that are supposed to be neutral, they are the ones that are supposed to be doing what I'm doing. But the press are the ones that are reporting and inciting this type of an issue. Are you with me? Once I had an opportunity to, I go around a lot. I was with a couple that also we discussed these issues. They have a hotel, and obviously we were talking about, there was an issue in the papers about migrants being housed in hotels. I saw a bit of this during the COVID, which was rightful, because in COVID they didn't want anybody to be out, and so they put these people. They should really be in detention camps whilst their cases are being processed. But it wasn't the case, and these people. When I was speaking to this couple, they told me that they have hotels where they are getting a whole lot of money from the government for housing these migrants. So they are actually domestic people, local people are profiting from this situation. And so this is why we really need to reassess ourselves and not to be fooled again. If you are so passionate about you supporting that Britain should get out of the ECHR, the founding members of the ECHR, and also the court, not just the ECHR, but also the European Court on Human Rights, or Human Rights in Strasbourg, then really you got to think twice, because it may not be you today, but you may be a victim tomorrow. So take time and just go and read articles of the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights, and you will indeed know that this thing is good for you, is good for your family, is good for your generations and generations to come in this country, to protect humanity, or to protect the people from from an abusive state. Because this thing, dictators in suits, we are seeing that in politics. Dictators in suits, just because somebody is not wearing army clothes and carrying a gun, it doesn't mean that they are not dictators. They are dictators. And so we must wake up and be wise, and just to protect yourself. Because we as a nation, if you look at the history and you go to see how 10,000 Kenyans, Mau people, were just massacred. Our human rights records are, and we treat other people like animals. Not to mention all these wars and these things. It's very easy for people to say, oh, look at China, they have terrible human rights records. Look at Russia, they are all horrible people, killing people. What have we done ourselves? We also have to be responsible and make sure that we have the right laws. And today, no nation is absolutely sovereign, because every nation have to depend on other nations for trade. We must compromise, negotiating, compromising, working with others, to build our nation. Why are we going away from our European neighbors? Why do we get into Europe now and be so disrespected? Because we are just economically trying to look better. We have based so much on economics, where even the ordinary person, your life is getting worse and worse and worse because your income is not going up, but every other thing is going up. Your food, your electricity. Let's winter shows when you need some electricity, they say your electricity is gone up, your gas has gone up, your water has gone up. You know, everywhere you food, anadin, common anadin, 16 pieces for £4 in Tesco. This is not in a corner shop. If this thing is in a corner shop, it will be okay. It's not in a corner shop. So this is a serious situation. And people are just going about like so much into the day-to-day that we don't take a moment to reflect, to say what is happening to us as a people, as a nation. And so thank you for watching this video. Surely I got some more videos on ECHR coming up, because there are quite a few articles that I have read that indeed we have to discuss this, because we see people saying let's get out of it completely, then others are saying let's change it so that it will suit us, because we are committing the atrocities, and so, or we are the ones that are abusing the rights of other people. It doesn't affect us, but we must remember the past. You know, we must remember the past and what it has been and what really caused nations to come together to have these sort of laws to protect their citizens, so that, you know, the future will be better for the next generation. So thank you for watching this video. This is my opinion. Surely you have your opinion. If you disagree with me, I am very happy to hear from you. Let your thoughts be known. Just be polite. It's a discussion that we are having. I don't know it all, but the bit that I know, I bring to you to say, let's have a really good think before we go and make more mistakes like we did in Brexit, and carrying on in that manner. And also certain people that are in position that have actually benefited from these human rights laws. You know, people that are from as I said, people that are currently in Westminster making decisions, probably a quarter of them couldn't trace their ancestry deep, 1,000 years or 800 years in this country. Most of these people that are probably have their ancestors rooted in this country are not in London, where decisions are made. And so think about how these things have benefited you as a British person or as an English person. And yeah, think about it, and also ensure that your rights are protected. So if you disagree with me, I am happy to hear what your comments may be. But also, if you've also had an experience where your rights has been abused with impunity, and you have not had any opportunity or hope for redress, then also share your story. Add it in the comments. So until next time, hopefully very soon, because now we're back from summer break, and we're getting into the winter, getting back into putting out more and more videos. So let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.